So good evening, and this today's conversation um, is primarily around a theatre language that is maybe we called it a hybrid in its nature, which is interdisciplinary, that a conversation between different art forms. And here we, three theatre practitioners, Neelam, Mansingh, Chowdhry, Anuradha, Kapur, and myself, and we have collaborated on various theatre productions for the last 10 to 15 years. And me, as a theatre practitioner, that I direct my own shows, but also I work as a scenographer, as an independent scenographer that collaborate with the other directors. Yesterday, I performed one of my production, which was an adaptation of Alfred Jarry's Uberoi, and I'm sure some of you must have seen it. So today's discussion is also, we little touched upon that production, which also kind of give a context to this conversation, because that's a good example to start with, what is we call as a theatre of hybrid, a conversation between different disciplines. And here, Murali Cheeroth, he's also actually primarily a visual artist, and but also he's a performance artist too. So he make a performance art, meaning live art, not theatre, which is a form that, as you will know, that is a form that primarily practices the body practice within a space and materials. But the kind of theatre what you saw yesterday, also not really strictly, it's not a kind of a strict, can't stay in the strict borders of theatre, which actually often cross the borders of theatre into other disciplines, installation art, visual art, exploring dramaturgy through design, dramaturgy through architecture, costumes, and many more. So my practice as a scenographer and a director, I often start my work looking at a space as the primary material to begin the work, which is quite different from a conventional playmaking process, where mostly we begin from a text. A written text is a starting point. But Uberoi, although there was a text to begin the process, text was not in the material that only I took as a stepping stone to explore the ideas of a language of a theatre. Before I speak more about the Uberoi and my practice, I would rather hand over the mic to Anuradha Kapur to give a bit of a context of the kind of a theatre which you experienced yesterday, and I kind of speaking about the hybrid form or interdisciplinary form, or theatre rather more of a multisensorial experience rather than you understand the narrative through the dialogue or the text. But the theatre I'm talking about has a history, and that historical context maybe Anuradha can shed a bit of light to that.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here. It's a very special occasion to be part of the Hortus Festival. I just take the cue from what Deepan has said, and I'll pick out three words which he's talked about, and which is something that we theatre makers often talk about. One of the words is text, the other word is scenography, and the third word, which is in the title of the talk today, discussion today, is the visual. But what has happened in the last some years, that there has been a great division between what is seen as text and what is seen as visual. And sometimes we have also begun to think of the visual being only in service of the text, as if the visual is something that the text will tell you exactly what the visual is going to be. So there is in this division a peculiar kind of hierarchism. This is on top, this is next, this is next, this is next. And I think in many of our works and also in the history of theatre making, there have been attempts to break a kind of hierarchy in which the text is on top, the director is second, and then at the point which is horizontal are the actors and the crafters and the technicians. I think that this kind of division and hierarchy produces, I mean, sometimes it produces very interesting work, but it is the division that I think concerns all of us here, because there is need not be a division. And I think that the fact that there is a division is sometimes misunderstanding what in itself theatre can do. Theatre is spectacle, theatre is hearing, theatre, audio, visual, audience that hears but sees in the theatre, which means seeing. So I think that in many of the works, starting from the historical avant-garde, is the meaning that you bring in all kinds of disciplines in the theatre, whether it's construction, whether it's installation, whether it's image making, painting, now lens-based work, and we make a theatre performance that goes past all these different kinds of disciplines. But what I want to say before I hand over to and talk about it is that there are many instances now in which these divisions between theatre makings, what we do in theatre making, acting, scenography, sound, music, I think the divisions are now less visible in something like Ubu, where, let us say, the sound will often do the work of text. And when the text is there, the visual will and the text will come as in banners together. Does it mean that we see the text as a banner first and then hear the visual? No, we probably do it together. And I think these togethernesses, this breaking down of particular hierarchy is of interest. And yesterday's show, Ubu, begins with that. So it's not as if the text is the end. The text is the beginning to take all kinds of flight. And I want to just end this little thought of mine and say that all kinds of classical theatres, including many in the European tradition and also ours, don't privilege necessarily one sense above the other. And I think here we might want to think that how do we actually bring all the sensorial aspects, seeing, hearing, sometimes even tasting in a play, touching, so that the play is about ourselves, our body, as much a part of the performance. So these are in some senses, this has been part of lots of traditions, and we know that it has been part of many traditions here in India and various parts and regions of India. It has been the tradition in Europe. The carnival is a tradition that brings in many of these possibilities of having all the senses activated by theatre, as for instance yesterday's Ubu was able to do. And I think that's where we may actually plan our thoughts around the fact that in what way can theatre make us think not just by our brains but by our bodies. And I think that's something that we can make an attempt to while we make theatre. So how would you like to go? Shall we?
When Anuradha was talking about theatre of senses, and particularly theatre that can experience the body, and here, Neelam Mansingh Chowdhry, one of the directors in our country who has explored the sensorial theatre with one of her early productions called Kitchen Katha, which is entire theatre is a kitchen that almost 2 hours long is a constant cooking of different dishes. And it has been performed. The kitchen has become the forefront of the experience. That vision, often in Indian houses, kitchen is always hidden somewhere in the backyard of it, not a place where everybody can reach into it. It's a private space where Neelam brought kitchen to the forefront. The discourse is kitchen itself, the cooking, the food and the senses. Maybe you would like to say something about that, bringing one of the directors in our country that brought this kind of essence of theatre as a language, of a senses.
Thank you very much, Deepan. I'd forgotten about that play completely. Seems such a long time back. But I always felt that, we talk about the visual, we talk about words, we talk about text, we talk about space, we talk about the body, but we never talk about smell. So for me, the olfactory nerve, which has been slightly not so highly defined for the stage, was also something which I wanted to explore. And I come from Amritsar. My father came from a Gurdwara tradition. So langar was very much part of the atmosphere in which I grew up, where community cooking, where stories were shared. It was actually, strangely, that part of the religious activity in a Gurdwara was handled by women, where they not only cooked and fed and nurtured the community that came to partake of this fair, they also told stories, shared stories. So I decided that I was going to do a play about the kitchen. It was called Kitchen Katha, the story of the kitchen. So we had, those were different times when you could have fire on the stage. Now, even a candle is considered blasphemous. So we had about 10 um, gas cylinders on the stage, and the timing of the cooking and the time of the scene construction had to be synchronized, because if you are feeding the audience in the course of the play, you can't serve them uncooked food or food which is not well prepared. So it was like a certain different kind of precision had to be used. All theater is about detailing, it's about timing, it's about structure, it's about many of those things. But when you involve cooking in it, it requires a completely different notion of time. And especially when you're feeding the audience in the course of the whole production. And the other thing is that B.V. Karan, the very eminent theatre director and music director as well, he composed the music for the song, for the play, and all the songs were recipes. So the songs were recipes which were sung, and all the instruments that were used for creating the musical score were the sounds of the kitchen, the hissing, the tadka, the tarkari, the scraping, the mortar and pestle. So it was a very interesting experiment, which it wasn't an experiment, it was something I really believed in. And it was something that I felt, of course, you need a text. So where do you get the text? So I pulled out text from different um, literature that was about women and food, like Isabel Allende's, uh, like Water for Chocolate. Then I had Aphrodite by, who wrote Aphrodite? I seem to have just slipped the name, got a little bit of a brain fog. I think it's a heavy lunch I had. So it was a very interesting. So now what has happened is that most of my plays, somehow food becomes a very imperative part, but food was also a metaphor. It wasn't just for cooking, it was about what to eat and how much, about pollution, about cleanliness. It was also metaphorical. Like in one scene, when the main protagonist, who was called Tara, hears that her lover is marrying somebody else. So I had her in a huge cauldron of a parat, as they call it, where another actor makes her into a statue of flour by pouring about 10 kilos of flour on her while she's saying her dialogue. Now you have to be very careful in a play like that. If an actor is covered with the atta, then how do you get rid of the atta? So there are all kinds of decisions you have to take. So later she cleans her face with papaya. So it was, I, I've really forgotten about the play. Thank you for reminding me, Deepan. I think I've said enough. I hope you have a visual sense of the play, what it was all about. It was really about women and cooking and food and
Thank you very much. I'll begin with what I mean, apart from the theatrical experiences and the other things, how the performance art, I mean, especially the artist people who initiate that programs, I mean, how the uh, how they look at, I mean, the performance art, how they look at, I mean, theatrical art and all. You have to make the art stronger than life so people can feel it. In the classic understanding of performance art, the work merges not simply as an object but as an act of making. It rejects the representation and imitation in favor of a direct encounter between the artist, then material, and unfolding movement. The visual or the performance artist does not, I mean, recount, repeat, or reconnect or reenact. Rather, they engage in the raw labor of doing, making, shaping, assembling, transforming. This process is real and immediate, grounded in lived experiences. Art become not entertainment, but a form of investigation, where each action is an experiment with a fragment of one's own life and perception. Curiosity drives the practice, the pursuit of, I mean, discovery, transformation, and knowledge. Working with the elemental component of time, space, material, and gesture continually expands and boundaries of what may be considered art. Because of an artwork cannot be separated from the body that makes it, its rhythms, its sensory habits, and histories. Fundamental questions arise. What distinguishes a gesture of art? How does a brushstroke differ from everyday movement? What signals that a surface, a illustration, or found object has crossed into a realm of artistic intention? Where does an artwork begin and where does it end? The context which a visual or, I mean, performance art or act occurs, I mean, deeply shapes how it perceived. A mark made on canvas in the studio or placed in a gallery is readily interpreted as art, supported by the institutional and spatial cues of the art world. But what of, I mean, a mark made on a public wall? What of materials loosely arranged in a market, a workshop, or in the street? What kind of, I mean, framing, visual, spatial, conceptual, enable a viewer of recognized action or object of as an item? And once they do, how does this shift the meaning of what is seen? I mean, these questions expand into larger considerations of what art can be. A gesture of intervention may be embryonic, resistant to commodification, existing only briefly in space and time. Yet, its force lies in its capacity to alter perception, to prompt viewers to imagine alternate ways of seeing, inhabiting, and responding to the world. Visual actions and performative interventions can rise spontaneously, shaped by environments, social conditions, or immediate circumstances. In this sense, the artists become a figure capable of infiltrating multiple contexts, using materials, space, and embodied gesture to open a new pathways for thought and sensorial engagement. I bring the entire thing into the performance context, and I have a few questions to, I mean, participants of this thing. First question I would like to ask uh, Anuradha ji. My humble questions to you, Anuradha ji. Is this, I mean, how does a director known for a cross-disciplinary collaborations with the visual artist video practitioners and filmmakers, and having worked with Vivan Sundaram, Bhupen Kakar, Madhusri Datta, Nalini Malani, and Neelima Sheikh, contribute to the expanding ecology of contemporary theatre? In what ways does your practice reshape the relationship between performance, visual culture, and collaborative artistic ecosystem?
Thank you for that. It's a tough question. Um, I think the initial decision to start working with visual artists, um, starting with Neelima and Bhupen many years ago in 97. Actually, before that with Neelima Sheikh in 93, and before that with Vivan Sundaram. But the idea was twofold at that time. And one part of that idea was that I was not at all comfortable on the stage while telling a story in which the visual of the stage was only functional, in the sense that if there was a table and chair required, we had a table and chair. If there was a window required, we had a window. But I found that somehow stories got perhaps more space to be experienced if it was not functional. And what working with a visual artist made me, along with all the actors, aware of the fact that we often seem to have worked with blinders like this. And one of the first questions that the actors asked, and now don't ask, but in the mid 90s, they would say, if I am acting in front of Neelima Sheikh's 20 by 20
panels.
image, who am I? I'm nothing. And I think it is this sort of question, which was a troubling question, because we were taking for granted that there is a hierarchy on stage in which the actor is central, and that all the meaning comes from the actor.
Yes.
But we know that all the meaning comes together on stage. The visual will make as much meaning as the actor. So till a long time through this process, this fight between disciplines took place.
Oh, okay.
And the fact that who am I? And the question always came from the actor. I don't think Neelima or Bhupen or Nalini ever asked, they're standing and masking my painting. So I think it's about the way that we thought that theatre has a certain, as I said in the initial hierarchy, and central to that hierarchy is the actor and her word.
Yes.
But when you stand against Bhupen's work or Nalini's work, they are making you do certain things of which you must become aware. So, for instance, in Sundari, where Bhupen painted a tissue curtain,
Yes.
and Neelima painted the backdrops and the wings, when you have the actor playing Jai Shankar Sundari, the female impersonator, stand against a big image of Ravi Verma, he will have to carve his body according to the image of which he's part. And I think that what happened there was that there was one methodological thing I learned there, was that when you start work on a play, Neelima will start, Bhupen will start, the actors will start, I will start, the music given by Vidya Rao will all start together. So it's not as if when the play is ready, the set will come, and when the set will come, the music will come, and then the lights happen all together. So not only then do we try and break hierarchy of time, but we also try and break the hierarchy of what comes first, and what's the last is a production in the auditorium, and after that we forget the dialogue. So these were sort of opportunities to say that our discipline as theatre makers is not a single one. So,
Thank you very much. My next question is to Neelam ji. It's very simple. She has gone through a lot of political up and downs, and even she faced a lot of troubles when the riot happened in Delhi. Neelima ji, you have witnessed and experienced many shifts, social, political, and artistic, throughout your life. Someone deeply engaged in political theatre, how do you envision transforming the contemporary theatrical landscape? How do you national values and social political struggles shape your practice and contribute to the evolving ecology of theatre today?
Um,
Recently I've seen the Hayavadana, that was like, I mean, sixth or seventh time, and the scenography was done by Deepan. I mean, that was an amazing experience. I mean, I met you also in Bangalore. I mean, you remember?
I don't think I was in Delhi during the 84 riots.
Okay.
I do believe everything, as Toni Morrison says,
Ah.
whatever is personal is also political.
Okay.
So, in that context, I figure in your question,
Okay.
but I don't know where the information is from.
Ah.
But let's talk about Haibadan,
Yeah.
because that's the last thing I did with Deepan.
Yeah.
No, I think that was Lemon Soda. Haibadan, as you know, is a very complex play written by Girish Karnad. And Deepan and me have had a wonderful collaboration. And I think, in a certain way, the word scenography was defined to me by Deepan's engagement in just about every dimension of the production, right from designing, right from costumes to the placement of music to the choreography, to the scene construction. So I would say a scenographer is not a scenic designer. When he came to Chandigarh to see the rehearsals, and I think he made 3 or 4 visits, I think I had some trunks at the back on which the actors were sitting, which was improvisational, which was more for processing the work and arriving at a certain understanding of how to position, in what kind of visual language to place the actors. And then in the evening, when after the rehearsal was over, he saw a truck that I had brought from Pakistan. Pakistan is famous for its painted trucks, and I'd just come back from Lahore. And he saw that sitting in the living room, and he said, "We'll have a truck on the stage." I'm very scared of Deepan because his ideas are so frighteningly imaginative that sometimes for me to actually participate in that imagination means that I have to cross and traverse many of my own minuscule ways of dealing with things, because we are a traveling company. I need everything to fit into boxes, to be put under the seats of the railway berth, and to travel. But Deepan has a scale which is overwhelming, and which really enhances the quality of the work you do. So he said, "We'll have a truck on the stage." I kept on trying to persuade him, "Let's have a reda, let's have a cart." Do you remember that famous film of Raj Kapur's, Tisri Kasam? We'll have a cart. He said, "No, no, you're a traveling company, we'll have a truck." So the truck it was, because you can't negotiate with him.
That was amazing design. That the truck.
Well, I have to give credit very much to Deepan. And of course, you talked about the politics of what I do. The play as it is written, you say, perform the play as it is written. How do I know how it was written, what the playwright was thinking? How do I know how Shakespeare was thinking, where he put the dots and commas? I found it quite amazing that even though you're talking about a woman's world of desire and about her sexual attraction towards the body of one and the mind of the other, the whole duality of what it means, mind and body kind of conflict that is part of the conundrum of the text. In the end, why did he resort to a very conventional, traditional kind of ending, where the woman commits sati, Padmani, and where the guys die in a duel? I thought, bahut marna ho gaya hai. I don't want everybody dying on the stage. It's just too much for me to deal with. So I flipped the ending completely. So one is always flipping, even when Devdutt and couple are introduced to the audience. I've seen so many productions because it's a classical text, modern classical text, which almost every theatre company has performed at some stage or the other. You have the intellectual Devdutt coming with the potha, and you have Kapil, who is the bodybuilder, coming with some kind of kushti ka saman. And I thought, I don't want to do that. So I put them on the edge of a riverbank, which Deepan created, out for a secret drink. So I think a text becomes classical because it doesn't have closures. It affords you the possibility of interpretation. And it has survived the test of time because they know that there's not one way of looking at it. There are multiple ways in which you can look at a text. And that possibility did exist in Haivadan. It was quite challenging to do it, but thank you for talking about it.
The next question is to Deepan. I would like to speak in Malayalam because when the Ubroi is in Malayalam. That we can translate a little bit. But also we need to look at the audience. ദീപൻ്റെ ദീപൻ്റെ ഒരു പ്രാക്ടീസിന് എനിക്കറിയാവുന്ന ഒരു പ്രാക്ടീസ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് കല പഠിക്കാൻ പോയി തിയേറ്ററിലോട്ട് തിരിച്ചു പോയ ഒരു മനുഷ്യനാണ്. അതായത് തിയേറ്റർ കണ്ടെത്തിയ ഒരു മനുഷ്യനാണ്. ആ ഒരു പേഴ്സ്പെക്റ്റീവിൽ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ ചെയ്ത വർക്കുകളിലൊക്കെ തന്നെ കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്ന ഒരു എലിമെൻ്റ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അതിൽ ആർട്ടുണ്ട്, പെർഫോമൻസ് ആർട്ടുണ്ട്, വീഡിയോ ഉണ്ട്, ഫോട്ടോഗ്രാഫിയുടെ ഏറ്റവും മികച്ച രീതിയിലുള്ള സെനോഗ്രഫി ശരിക്കും സെറ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. അതേപോലെ തന്നെ ഒരു ഹിസ്റ്റോറിസിറ്റി, ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ബൗഹേഴ്സ് തൊട്ട് ഷ്ലെമ്മറുടെ വർക്ക് തൊട്ട് ഇപ്പോൾ കണ്ടംപററി ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഇപ്പോൾ മറീന ബ്രോമിക്ക് വരെയോ അല്ലാന്ന് വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പോൾ പോൾ നെൽസണി വരെയോ ഒക്കെ എത്തി നിൽക്കുന്ന പെർഫോമൻസ് ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റുകളുടെ ഒരു സംക്ഷിപ്ത രൂപത്തിലുള്ള ചില എലിമെൻറ്റുകൾ ഭയങ്കര കൃത്യമായിട്ടുള്ള രീതിയിൽ പ്ലേസ് ചെയ്ത് കാണാൻ പറ്റും. ഈ ഉബ്രോയുടെ കാര്യത്തിൽ ഇത്രയും പഴക്കം ചെന്നൊരു ടെക്സ്റ്റ്, അതും ഇന്നത്തെ ഒരു വളരെ കലുഷിതമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു രാഷ്ട്രീയ തലത്തിൽ എന്താണ് പ്രകോപിപ്പിച്ചത്, ഏത് രീതിയിലാണ് ഇൻസ്പയർ ചെയ്തത്, ഏത് രീതിയിലാണ് അത് ചെയ്യേണ്ട ആവശ്യകതയെ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത് എന്നൊന്ന് പറയാമോ? അവിടെ ഈ ഇത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു ഇക്കോളജിക്കൽ സൈഡും കൂടി പറയുന്നത് നന്നായിരിക്കും.
I think I'll answer that in English. Continue to answer
issues,
to our
Yeah.
guests are in English language speakers, and maybe it will be rude to answer that in Malayalam. I'm sure all of you could follow what I'm saying.
That's okay. That's not issue.
All right. So, the question is about Ubroi primarily, about whether the play has a historical link with the historical avant-garde, which touched upon from 1896 Jari's, the theatre of provocation till now, the various historical junctions of avant-garde artists has been touched upon as reference, been used. Answering to Murali's question, there are 2-3 points I would like to make.
Yes.
One is that starting with the very question you asked about the historicization of the work itself. Ubroi particularly, when I pick this text, when I choose a text to work with, I have a reason why I choose to make one. And in this particular work, Ubroi, when I picked this text, this 1896 text, as you know, is one of the early texts that has been considered as the beginning of the avant-garde art, and which open up new ideas. And that led to the many artistic discourse and manifestos of surrealism to Dadaism to constructivism, expressionism to many more, which is a history. But this particular text was also made another proposition, because we were talking about the pyramidical supremacy that literature always held, that literature as the key philosophical, conceptual key to the theatrical experience. From that very idea uh, to the hybridization of all the elements of theater has become equally important as text, which is actually interesting when we actually discussed in the literature festival. Um, so Jari's text actually itself allowed us to question the very existence of the text. That itself is very important because writers like Beckett, for example, often even if his famous letter to a young playmaker in Berlin when he dared to change one of his play, and he furiously wrote, a role of a director is to physicalize what we write, not to interpret or change it. And now we know how actually directors deal with the text. Text often used as a raw material to begin the process, and it can go any way, and it's become kind of a physical, time-based experience as a theater rather than a textual experience. So Uberoi, for me, the moment I picked that text, I thought that my practice has been deeply influenced by historical avant-garde. And my education, being a St. Martin's College of Art student back in 2003, where I was mostly exposed to the avant-garde theatre when I was a student in St. Martin's College of Art and Design, London. Then I was doing scenography and I taught a few years, and I went on to do a doctoral program at Wimbledon College of Art, where I was mostly looking at what happened in Europe and the language of theatre, where literature always held a supreme position, whether start from Shakespeare to Ibsen to Chekhov. There are huge canons when we talk about dramatic literature. Even we could not even identify who actually directed Shakespeare, Ibsen, and Chekhov, because we only hear about these great writers. Now we speak a lot about the directors. Who directed Peter Brook's Mahabharata, or Neelam Mansingh Chowdhury's Haivadana, or Deepan Sivaraman's Subroi, or Deepan Sivaraman's Gasak in Digasam. This was never the case. It was always the writer has been celebrated, somebody that give the light, the torch to enter into the space, right? So for me, I was looking at historical avant-garde in the terms of course, Jari as a prime person, and also my work has been deeply influenced by Arto. I'm doing Arto, theatre of cruelty, so much of grotesque and scatology has been discussed in his practice. And when I talk about Arto, actually although I have been very deeply influenced by Arthodian theatre, but I also quite influenced by the tribal and folk theatre in our own region in Kerala. Forms like a Theyyam. When I speak about Theyyam, I need to touch upon Gasak and Idihasam, one of my other production where Theyyam has been used, or Theyyam become the central idea when I evolved a language for the theatre. A lot of fire, a lot of cooking, a lot of ritual, a lot of burial, a lot of scent has been used, a lot of bodily practices, which is quite a raw, quite a rough, quite a grotesque, quite a violent, bloody. And this, when you look at the classical forms of art in our country, for example, whether it's a Kudiyatam or Kathakali, Mohiniyattam, Bharatanatyam, all these forms are very clean, subtle forms, beautiful forms. So there is a celebration about when you talk about performance, always needs to be beautiful, so charming. But life is not that charming always. Life is often very grotesque, very violent, especially contemporary life. And how can we make art all the time so beautiful, so like a rose petal, like jasmine flower? Life doesn't smell like jasmine always. So then when I was talking about Artho, so when we actually watch a ritual form like a Theyyam or Padayani or many tribal other forms, they're very rough form. They're jumping into the fire, they burn, and they run around, they beat themselves up. So there are a lot of agony, a lot of self-pain involved in it, which is quite evident in many of the folk and ritual forms, which is interesting because that's not the classical forms where you can sit aramse and you can have a drink and see beautifully an art. So there is no that much of relaxation in a folk tribal space. So their life is so troubling, so much of a violence involved in their life. Therefore, their art itself is also quite a grotesque and quite violent in that way. So my practice also kind of inspired from that very idea of art is coming from not for art for anandam, but art also for disturbance. So this art for disturbance or art for provocation is the very idea of theatre of avant-garde, as we know. Art is not to entertain the rich or aristocrat, but art is to question. Art is to problematize the life, problematize the time and space we live in. So that's the very idea of the practice of a tech material like Ubro. So where, certainly Artho or a Brechtian political theatre, there are a lot of text being used in Ubroa. There's a lot of text being written like the bear, too fascist, game over, fuck off. So a lot of text being used in it as like Brecht used text in his work, like directly tell what I intend to tell. Okay, I'm not going to hide away. This is what I want to tell you, and I'm going to tell you that. And of course, there is many other practitioners I was familiar with, like a Cantor, a very well-known avant-garde director from Poland, who was one of the, pioneer of performance art, live art form, like who worked with the objects, materials, and many other things. So in the terms of making of this work, of course, there is a lot of collaboration and association that comes in. So I do work with visual artists, and Murali has rightly pointed out. And I'm a practitioner who actually initially wanted to study painting. And I went to actually do an entrance examination in Trivandrum College of Fine Arts back, just when I just finishing my pre-degree. And I was rejected by College of Art. They did not give me a seat to study there. So I was completely heartbroken. And I came back, and all my friends at that time managed to get into Fine Arts College, and they all become very well-known painters and sculptors. And I went back to Thrissur, and I did not even know the drama school existed that time. But luckily, I came to know there is a drama school in Arnatagara, and I went there and I filled a form. And then I became a theatre practitioner. It was kind of an accidental. Otherwise, would have been a painter or a sculptor like Murali Cheeroth. But I never, left my excitement of looking at objects and the life in a way that a visual artist look at it. Maybe that is one of the reasons why my practice has this kind of a conversation between visual arts and space. And also, I was equally interested in architecture because my father was actually an architect, and he was a carpenter, and he was also somebody who was an expert in vastu and all of that. So I learned carpentry from him when I was very, very young. When I was 15-year-old, I learned carpentry, and I actually practiced carpentry for many years. Nearly 7 to 8 years, I practiced carpentry. So I built house. And I used to build furniture. So I used to work with the materials quite a lot. So I also have a relationship with the space. And of course, that point of time, I never knew about scenography, something a discourse exists. But this all happened maybe one point of time when I went to London to study at St. Martin's College of Art and Design. Many of the things that I did before, like me as somebody who an aspiring visual artist and also a builder or carpenter who built houses, that I have had an understanding of space where people live. So theatre is also a space for people to live, but is only live for a certain period of time, an imaginary world where we built a theatrical space, maybe a castle, maybe a park, maybe a hell, maybe a heaven. All these are different kinds of spaces, often philosophical spaces, or the real representational spaces borrowed from the real life. But there is a kind of edge to that, like you're a carpenter or a builder, an architect look at the world. But you look in a space like a 40 by 40 or 60 by 40, a temporary space where it's not constructed as a permanent space to live, that you have to dismantle once this work is over. So the conversation I always have had with my artists, fellow artists like Ando George, or a musician like Chandran Vayatumal, a technical artist called Kochi, and many other artists I normally work with. So my conversation is with them is that I begin my practice from the very first day. I always will have all these artists will be in the same place, be living together. So the conversation that happens in a daily basis. So it is not that a prompt been given from the text that, oh, there is a puppet. Now I have to look for a puppeteer to make it. No, that was not the case. Uberoi does not have a puppet in Jari's Uberoi. There's no reference of puppet in it. But I imagined a scene where, the president's wife is having a nightmare, and in that nightmare, Ubu coming and killing her. And I thought that could be a gigantic, larger than life puppet. Then I asked Ando, how do you build a puppet? But I don't need three people carrying a puppet. How do we engineer it? How do you make a puppet that has this possibility, dynamism, that can move more freely, easily? So that was the idea, that a prompt I have given to him. So this puppet, prototype of puppet, he built and bring it to the stage where actors use it and rehearse it and test it. Then I can get convinced that, oh, the puppet is functioning. So I can now write nightmare scene. Then I write nightmare scene. So the dramaturgy been written based on Ando George's ability to build a puppet. It's not other way around. So this is the conversation I was talking about. So yesterday there was a machine, a machine where, Ubu's imaginary machine he built, and is sort of a machine that can collect all the human shit and make the entire problem in the country can be solved. That's Ubu's imagination. When the subject was built, and he said, and I told him, what can happen when this machine break down? And he said, maybe this, what happened, mostly machines break down, some smoke will come off it. Electric objects, diffuse, smoke will come out. But how do you make a smoke out of an object? And that is engineering solution he brought. I still don't know how he managed that problem, but he showed me one point of time, I press this remote and the smoke will come off it. And it will stay for 3-4 minutes and it will diffuse itself. And I was so very happy. I did not ask him any further question how he resolved it. But that's the way we work. So then that scene has become an important scene in the play. So our practice is more of like a painter paint. You use a lot of materials and you constantly make it. It's not like that you have a written script and you follow every day, I am going to do this, I am going to do this. It's never like that. The script is keep evolving. You keep writing the text. And that's the way the work actually happens on the floor.
I have another questions to you. How do you stage the trance? I mean, most of your performance, Sakindi Diyasam, then Uberoi, then many other, even the spinal cord. There is a state of trance, people, witness or experience, and exhaustion. Even very ritualized, the state of, actors' mind, or the performance, how do you bring, the different ecology to embodiment, of your practice?
I kind of like the idea of an actor melt on the stage. Yeah. Actor melt on the stage, and what I meant is
that was visible in Kasakinde Diyasam.
Yeah, quite extensively used, because that's coming from a Theyyam as a form, and the trance is the very essence of in the Theyyam performance. The performer towards end is kind of across that boundary, and we don't know where he is reached. And at last he become kind of a presence of a godly presence, and he starts to converse with the audience, right? So I often tell these actors, how can we go into that amount of a little madness, that you slowly cross that border of sanity in your performance, cross that border of the sanity. And how do you cross the border of the sanity? If you decide to run, you can run in a normally you run, but you can actually run faster, then faster, then faster. Then when you run faster, you know that your body cannot take it anymore because you're going to fall down. But I'm going to tell you, run faster, you run more. Then you run to an extent that you lose the control of your body and also your mind, because you cannot control it anything. But then when I ask you to run somebody, that will be a safe place to run. You cannot run anywhere. So in theater, that's possible because that running takes place in an imaginary world. You are not running in a physically. If I ask somebody to run physically, that has to be party field. Then nothing would happen to an actor. And I actually do ask in a Gasak, I asked actors to run to the party field. They have to run, maybe. They have to run a 2 kilometer on the party field. They fall down and run. But while they run 2 kilometer, they get really exhausted. They get a complete lost control over their bodily presence. This is not logical. Logically, why should I run? But actually, you run if you elephant chase you. You lose your sanity and you run. And you climb on a tree, even if you don't know how to climb a tree. And that's a moment of transition is what I also test with actors. And I always believe this ability, this human ability, an extraordinary ability that we human being has it. We think that we cannot handle it. But actually human being has an extraordinary ability to do it. That if you want, you can really jump from a 20th floor to the bottom. Of course with a safety belt, but not everybody can do it. I cannot do it. But it's possible to do it. And that possibility is what made us to go further and further and further and further. But in a theater, we always function within a very safety zone. Very, the terms of the materials we use, the way we engage with the actor's body and all of that. We always little worried how much we can actually do. And I think how much we can actually do has no borders often. Like when we worked, Neelam and I, we were speaking about the truck, story of a truck. I don't know how many of you have seen it. In her that work, there's a huge truck. The truck is bigger than the stage. It's like a large 407 truck. And this truck coming to the stage, and this truck is actually can carry 18 people on it. Like an entire 12 musicians sitting on the top, and the rest of the actors in the bottom, and the driver and his helper in the front seat. And the truck move. But on a stage, it has to move, and it needs to move. It cannot move with electricity, but it needs to be moved manually. So then we need to find a technological solution how the truck can move, how much weight this truck wheel can take, what kind of a hydraulic system we have to fix it in there, how do we engineer the truck. How much of metal we can use it? How much of gauge of metal we need to put it there in order to make sure that 12 people won't land on the 8 actors on the floor, in the first floor. And this truck has sometimes 360 degrees revolve around on the stage in one point of time. All this solution I felt is possible actually because we resolve much larger problems actually. When you think about science, for example, we send rockets in somewhere else. And if we manage to do that, we use extremely fast bullet train that can use a magnet and send train to 600 kilometers fast. If in science and technology, it can be resolved, theater can resolve this too. Because theater is in that way, we are often very hesitant to deal with technology. How much material, how much water, how much electricity, whether we use plastic, whether we use wood, metal, all these questions comes into our mind, which are often coming from our baggage of the theater which we practiced before. And I think we live in a contemporary time, technology is essential to us. And there is no way we run away from it, but accept it and deal with it. So, did I answer the question?
Yeah, kind of. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's the time to open for the question and answer. Audience can ask questions now.
My question is to Neelam ma'am. Ma'am, I watched your play twice in Delhi, one in 2017 and one in 2019, as part of a theatre festival organized by the Habitat Center. And I'm not a big theater enthusiast, but still because I was closely following those festivals, I felt, something that stood out in your play was the kind of movement on stage. I felt that there was a certain kind of frenzy in Dark Borders and Gumhe. I think these were the plays that you staged there. And it was like as an audience member, I sort of it was a new experience for me. I just wanted to thank you, and maybe if you have a response to that.
I can only say thank you for remembering two plays of mine. Gumhe is very special to me because it was a play that I'd been grappling with for many, many years. It's based on stories of the Aboriginals called in a small book, certain testimonies have been documented, which is called the Seven Stages of Grieving. It was it was really a challenge to translate each to transport each story, because the references that exist within the text itself are very far removed from anything that I've experienced locally or emotionally in my state. Um, so I hinged it around a missing girl, a girl who's missing from her village, and how everyone in the village is searching for the girl. So, in a certain way, it was about community, it was about loss, it was about grief, it was about migration, and within that, to find moments of affirmation and joyousness. So it was quite a huge challenge. You know, if you remember that scene about land and division of land, which was done with a small uh, piece of ply with barbed wire around it, and how through rice piles they tried to talk about land and its division. So it was very interesting for me to find ways to share that, make it communicable, connect with it. So it's a very special play for me. Unfortunately, I couldn't do many shows because COVID happened, and it sort of got lost somewhere in that whole period of isolation. But thank you for remembering it. And of course, Dark Borders was based very much on stories of Monto, which I go to over and over again. Monto doesn't leave me, he clings to me. Every time I think of doing a play, he comes to he comes inside my imagination. And I think the human condition is so well reflected in all his short stories that they are not dated, they don't belong to a certain period, even though he wrote it during the time of partition, but they still have deep relevance and resonance in my identification of the human condition. And what I like is that no matter how savage the situation is, human affirmation still exists.
We are going to take one last question.
It's not a question. I'm just taking this occasion to say thank you to both Neelam ma'am and Anuradha ma'am, because you might not remember me. I attended your workshop when I was studying in School of Drama and Fine Arts in 2019. So at that time, I was young, and I was so confused about theater, basically because I never wanted to be an actor in theater or in film, but the courses that I was getting where I studied before, it was basically acting oriented, but I always wanted to make performances, design performances. So it was basically your workshop, the workshops that we had from both of you and also other theater personalities. It really guided me, And after that, after COVID, me and along with my few friends, I created a collective, a women's theatre collective. And based on that, we are doing plays, workshops, focusing on women and children in Kochi. So I'm always grateful to both of you for giving me that push. You might not know about that, but that 23 days workshop, you were there for, I think, 3 or 4 days. So that performance making workshop still, I still have the notes of it. So I just want to say thank you to you, both of you. And thanks to Deepan sir also, as a senior, and your plays, including Kasakini Dihasam. And more than that, Dr. Caligari influenced me a lot. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you for supporting me indirectly and directly. Thank you.
Oh, sorry for the organizers. They have always said it's on time, but I'll just like to hear from all of you on your POVs on a thought that just came across my mind hearing all of you talking. So I just written it down. So kind of we discussed, like ma'am and everyone, we kind of discussed how we break the hierarchies when it comes to theater, when it comes to art, where there is visual text, all of this. And then also Mr. Deepan fantastically talked about how he goes beyond boundaries in the process that he takes to bring that to the stage, to represent it truly, to perform it truly, to give to the audience truly, all those things. So since it's, honestly, I've not seen any of the theater works that all of the master sitting in front of me. I'm not saying, but as a art enthusiast or a art fan and a design student or a design practitioner, I would just like to know, do you also think on how this audience will perceive this when the audience sees this on the stage, when the audience thinks, okay, maybe there is a lot of process and lot of thought process that have gone on, hard work which is done, and then it comes in a very different form on the stage. So as makers, do you think, how does this reach to the audience? How do they see it? Is there any thought work done behind that, or is it like this is the representation of the art and it'll have to be conceived in that way? So is there any, I'd like to know from each one of you. If there is time, it'll be great. I
think, time
Yeah,
is the issue. Anuradha ji, if you could, say a few words on that, that would be nice. So answer to that. We can
Well, it's a very tough question, and I think it's a particularly tough question for theatre makers, because on the one hand, when you learn about theatre, you learn from a position of saying you're not to consider the audience, right? But when you do theatre and when you actually take it out, there is a huge participation between audience and making. So I think that it's always, it's very shaky ground, and it's a ground that gets made together. And I think that perhaps the common thread that ties up here, all of us, is that we would like to make theatre that does not pretend that the audience isn't there. There are many, let's say the last 100 years, we have had theatre that pretends that this is a room, nobody's beyond the room, what is happening is here, and nobody's there. But I think maybe if there's any common thread, it is always to say that there is an audience and there is a performance, and it is being made in two ways. And I think that would be one part of the grammar, and I think it is always at the back of one's mind, not how it's going to be received, but the manner of connection it sets up. That's why you might make a decision about seating, about light, etc., etc. We are running out of time, so I'll
just quickly say one line. I mean, when we talk about art, and particularly theatre, always always sees a parallel to the way you consume food. Food. There was no art in the world that was prepared thinking that the audience will consume the way the way it has been prepared, because you cannot predict how the art will be consumed. Now, when you have a food, You have a culture of eating your own food. It does not make you only you can eat that food only. You always willing, able to engage with any food in the world. You might struggle if you never eat fish. First time you eat it, but you learn to eat it. And that learning is what happens when you make new art. Audience need to be learned to consume it.
Thank you, Deepan.
I think personally, I can talk about when I make a piece of work, the audience never enters into the space. It's like what Henry Miller said, that when you create, you wear the robe of a priest. But I do feel that 2 months of rehearsal, you prepared a draft. It gets completion when the audience sense its energy, and you find whether the moments that you've created on the stage in isolation with your actors in a space which is private and personal, but you recognize if it has worked once you are in front of an audience. Try performing in an empty space. It's very difficult. So the audience, we talk about an actor prepares. I think even an audience has to come with a certain preparation.